Welcome back. Today is Monday, the 12th of June, 2023. Still working on the fuel tanks, obviously. And the outboard ends here, when we close these out, there are a couple of things that need to happen. And one of them is that we have these reinforcement plates or doublers that go on the inside, like so. This will help create the seal where you have all these breaks between the individual tabs and the flanges. So as you can see, it's not drilled for that. So I need to drill these two pieces out, get it mounted up, seal it up with Pro Seal. And then the other thing that has to happen on the outboard ribs is there's a 7/16 tooling hole right here that obviously needs to be sealed up. If you had a rivet big enough, you could just drive a huge rivet in there, but it's a rivet size that if you're building a kit like this, you would never have a rivet that large just kind of rolling around in your kit. And if you did, you might not even be able to drive it. It's so big. So instead, what I'm going to do is just make a little patch plate to go on this would be the inboard side, just patch it from the inside, seal it, rivet it on. So that's what I'm going to work on today. In other news, today I did receive all of the remaining parts for my empennage kit, which were the six bearings to attach the control surfaces to the horizontal and vertical stabilizer. It's very tempting to just put this away and go work on that stuff, but I feel like that process is going to be more than a day or two to get it done, and so I think I should keep rolling on these fuel tanks until they're finally done. So yeah, let's get after it. It's going to be fun.
All right, let's see if I can get through this in a single pass. The location of those doublers isn't really too difficult to figure out. It just fits flush to the end or the nose of that rib. And then on the back side of it, or the aft side of that, it fits right kind of flush with that bevel. If you look at those ribs, you kind of see those two vertical lines impressed in them, and so yeah, it just fits right there. What I'm using here is a rivet fan. It's a cool little tool that helps you very quickly set up an evenly distributed or evenly spaced rivet line. The proper edge distance for these rivets, I'm using 1/8 inch or -4 rivets, would be a quarter inch from the edge. So I measured my rivet pattern to be 5/16 just to give me a little extra space. I'll tell you that when you're drilling, use a center punch to mark your holes to hopefully keep the drill bit from walking on you when you start drilling. But if you do what I did, which is to opt to leave the blue vinyl on while you're doing that process, there's a good chance it's going to walk on you a little bit. So maybe don't do that when you're doing real rocket surgery. This is not rocket surgery. This is just getting a plate to stick to a rib. It doesn't hold the wings on, it just holds itself onto the rib so that we can create a good seal around the ends of the fuel tanks in the nose section. What I did was I took I measured out my rivet pattern on one of those doublers, and they're sort of a mirror of each other. So then when it was done, I clamped the crap out of them together, making sure they're all squared, and just drilled both of them at the same time. And then you see me right here. Basically, clamps are your friend, especially if you're building solo. You need some really good high quality clamps, but not many of them. What you really need is a whole bunch of really cheap Harbor Freight clamps to be an extra set of hands when you work on stuff like this. So this turned out to be 3 hours and 12 minutes on the camera. but it's at a certain point you'll see me wandering around out in the yard on a phone call that obviously doesn't build an airplane. So we'll call it 3 hours. And there's there you go, right on cue, walking around in the yard. A little bit of comedy doing Pro Seal on these parts. When you saw me doing the interior ribs, there's a pretty easy way to hold the part cleanly while you're applying the Pro Seal, but on these little parts, I mean, for the patch that covers a 7/16 hole, all I used was a piece of 25 thousandths aluminum, a little strip 2 inches long by a ½ inch wide. You can see them sitting there on the table. I'm just kind of marking their location on the web of that rib. And then same thing, clamping them together and drilling them together at once. And this would all be, if you weren't sealing this thing, this would be maybe an hour and a half project to do all this, and that would just be kind of doing it casually. But Pro Seal turns it into a much longer process because once all of this is done, then I have to do the cleaning, scuffing, cleaning to make sure that the surfaces are in no way contaminated and we can get a good seal. So yellow rag is acetone for doing the quick and dirty cleaning. And then later there'll be a white rag that I use with MEK substitute to just clean and reclean until I have a white rag that doesn't show any sort of residue from the scuffing when I wipe down the parts, and then we're satisfied with it. So back to what I was saying with the Pro Seal in this application. These are small parts, and there's no way to hold them where you're not going to get Pro Seal all over the hand that is holding them, because you're putting a very, very thin coat on them, but you're covering them all the way to the edges. And I only mixed up a ½ an ounce of Pro Seal for these parts, and I was able to adequately cover them and get a nice little squeeze out and fill it around them. But if you were to look at these ribs while I was doing it, and when I was done riveting them, it would seem as though I had mixed up 4 or 5 ounces of Pro Seal. It was everywhere on these parts, and this camera doesn't catch it, but it gets all over your hands. Nothing you can do about it. I think I did as much cleanup on these 2 parts as I did on both of the fuel tanks to this point. Just to, and I mean, does it really matter? Probably not. I just, maybe just to spare myself from embarrassment when I show this fuel tank to my technical counselor. The total volume of, the total amount of Pro Seal that I have, I ordered a quart, so it's not a quart by volume, it's a quart can with a certain amount of it, because when you get that silver can and you open it up, it looks to be at most maybe 2/3 full. I have a lot of work done with the Pro Seal at this point. All of those interior ribs are done. Now at this point, these doublers and patch are put on the outboard ribs. I still have a lot of Pro Seal left. I know that in Scott McDaniel's video, he says that it takes him a little bit less than a half of a quart, like this package size, to do a set of tanks. And other people run out of sealant halfway through their first tank. So I've tried to be a little bit more in the Scott McDaniel's camp, and kind of keep updating myself and check in on his video and make sure that I'm doing it properly. So it seems to me like once I get to closing out and doing the baffles, I can't see myself running out at this point. I think I've got enough to get it done. So riveting all this on, I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but I just used AN 474, or in other words, 1/8 inch universal head rivets for these. Doesn't necessarily need a rivet that sturdy for what you're doing. In fact, once the Pro Seal is cured, these things will probably be on there for eternity without rivets. That being said, I don't have a bunch of universal head 3/32 rivets laying out around. I think I mentioned before the ones that I have are just because they must have been from a practice kit. But coming up here, you'll see the finished product, and you'll notice how gloppy it looks on that nose doubler, and that's because I had to encapsulate those rivet heads using a popsicle stick instead of a tube, because those are bigger rivet heads than I have a tube to do. So that wraps it up for episode 68. We'll catch you in the next one. Guess what? It's still going to be fuel tanks.